All right, let's begin. It is wonderful to see everybody here today. There I am. Okay. My name is Cohen. As many of you know, I'm the executive director of the Slifka Center for Jewish Life at Yale, and it is such a pleasure to be together tonight to look at some interesting things. Hope we'll all here in the Northeast be able to see it through the smoke and the haze, which has pervaded our our lives. So hopefully everybody is doing well and is staying healthy through this this situation we've got here. But let's begin. So I want to introduce, as always, my partner in this work, Rabbi Jason Rubenstein, the Howard M. Holtzmann Jewish Chaplain, and the two of us, senior leadership of the Slifka Center, and we're really excited to be with everyone tonight. So let's get started. Let me see if I can get this to view slideshow. Okay, so here's our agenda for tonight. We want to do a quick look back at 22-23 and some Q&A and an overview of some anti-Semitism issues and challenges to Jewish belonging. I mean, really, here's the framing, folks. I know a question that is really on everybody's minds, and I know this because so many people have asked it over the last many months, is Yale a good place to be Jewish? I mean, that's really the crux of the question, right? And so that's question one. And question two is, is the Yale administration doing everything that it can to make Yale a good place to be Jewish? That's another question we keep getting. And the third piece, which some folks ask, but everybody needs to know, is what is Slifka doing to ensure that the answers to the first two questions are yes? What is Slifka doing to make sure that Yale is a great place to be Jewish, and that the partnership is strong with the university, such that the university is aligned with these issues? That's really what we're focused on for today. So what we're going to do, so everybody has a sense of the schedule, is I'm going to turn it over now in a second to Jason, who's going to take you through some high level observations of the successes of the year. Because it's to understand what it means for Yale to be a good place to be Jewish, you have to understand what is Jewish, what is offered, what the community is like, what the engagement is like, what the opportunities are that are so positive, so that we can be really grounded. So he's going to show you some statistics, and we're going to show you some pictures, and we're going to take some Q&A on those pieces in particular. Going to plan for that to be in the 10-15 minute range, because even though that's the most important things that we could tell you, is all the successes that we're having in student engagement, we know that the majority of what folks want to hear about is the more challenging stuff. So we want to spend most of the time focused on that. So we're going to do the good stuff, some Q&A that's targeted if you have any questions about that, and then we'll move into some of the challenges. And then, as usual in our Slifka online programs, the questions and discussion is really the best part. So if you have questions as they come up, feel free to put those into the chat as we go, and we will take those questions after the presentation part is done. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to take us through the next part.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful that y'all are here. Welcome to Slifka Virtually. I'm here physically. If you look through those windows on the bottom, you would see me waving right now. So we're here, and many of you know me, all of you we're on Wall Street, right in the middle of campus, 19,000 square feet. This is the latest and greatest home the Jewish community has had at Yale. There have been a number of them. I see we've got Ilana Ponette and Dan Oren. So if you want the lived history and the official history, you can go to them. And over the past, well, not 2 years, but completed just over a year ago, the 2 years prior to that, we undertook a major renovation to the building, which involved some security features you can't quite see, but behind that leftmost pillar, there's now a security booth, which is outside of the building, or you'll have to kind of pass through some security before they can enter. Any Yale ID will get you in. And you can notice, I don't know if you have a good enough people remember, but those doors that you see used to be large wood and kind of not transparent or translucent doors. Those have been replaced to let more light in. A bunch of changes and renovations and improvements, and the building has really been working well for us. And I do want to just say at this moment that we I wanted it to be the case when I started here that, the building, you don't need a building, you just need people who are kind to each other and creative and inspiring. And you do need people who are kind to each other and creative and inspiring, and you also need a building. And so I just want to say that by way of gratitude to not only the kind, inspiring people who came before us, but also the generations of Yale's Jewish community, on whose shoulders we stand every day, and we just hope we leave the place better than we found it, like they did, or like you did for many of you on this call. So let's go to the next slide. Moving from here into what we do, right? So I think part of what is really interesting about Slifka and kind of makes it work is that it is not just one thing. It is many things to many people, and I'll just run through these and then say a word about how they integrate. So there's the marking of Jewish time, Shabbat, holidays, Israel's Independence Day, Passover, etc. Exploration of Jewish ideas and texts happens week in and week out in formal and informal ways in so many different formats. Welcoming meals, you'll hear more about that, but to have the dining area, Kikar Schusterman, not just be a place where you can get calories, but a place of community and friendship. Soulful expressions of Jewish religion and spirituality, right? People have spiritual needs, and college students are people. And so really part of our job is, and part of what makes this thrilling is to really find ways that are of music and other things that really touch people's souls. And I can share more about how that happens. Constructive opportunities to engage with Israel, we'll talk more about this, but really, front and center, I would say, is education, which includes travel, which includes meeting Israelis, which includes Israeli cuisine, which includes poetry, which includes, when questions of international law come up, making sure that Israeli Supreme Court justices are represented, on and on and on. Then stimulating, 7 versus 8, right? There's the eighth one we'll get to. It's a complicated experiences with the arts. It's a kind of a piece of Slifka's legacy where we do really interesting things with Yale and our Jewish artistic world. And then productive actions to make Jewish values of kindness and justice real in the world, right? So our social justice work, which I can share more about. And then the last thing is really advancing and advocating for the interests of Yale's Jewish community in ways that are not kind of discrete and, kind of student facing, but much, kind of in some ways broader and deeper. And I want to just give a shout out on the call to Pilar Montalvo, who has been a real friend and ally and partner in the Yale administration. You'll hear more about our work with Pilar and many others later, but just wanted to acknowledge your presence and thank you for being here. Now, the thing I want to say just about all of these is that the temptation is to think about each one of them as a discrete silo. Oh, there's the matzo ball soup Jews, and there's the social justice Jews, and there's the prayer Jews and the klezmer Jews. And the thing that makes this community really special is that we're all those kinds of Jews. And there's something that's vibrant and thrilling about being in a community where, this student steps up, you'll see the pictures because they're the master challah baker, and this other student steps up because they're the musical lead of the a cappella group, and this other student steps up because they built really deep relationships with the Black community and lead us, Jews, to show up for them on MLK Day and other times. And the way that we kind of all raise each other up based on our distinctive strengths and create something really amazing together. I hope you'll see that in the pictures. And you can't really see it in the numbers, but maybe you'll see it in the numbers. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so numbers. What do we do? So let's just turn off this. If we can stop the present slideshow for 1 second, I just want to say something about these numbers, about how and why I hate them, but they're also the best. Okay, so the numbers that we track, because they're the easiest numbers and they're not bad as far as they go, is how many students come to things and how many things students come to. Right, so that means how many students came to Slifka this year. I can give you a pretty good number. It's an undercount because you don't end up on this list by accident, but there are people who come to Slifka that we don't capture, if you come to do problem sets on the 3rd floor. Now, I don't love this methodology because it doesn't capture the quality of experiences, and it doesn't capture the relationships between students. And we are doing some really interesting work on that, which I can tell you more about. But take this for what it is, because I think there's something helpful here. So let's go back to the slides now. So we're going to look at this data just at the top level and maybe 2 pushes down. Okay, so the first thing is the total number of students engaged. That means they came to Slifka, we got their name because they signed in on a sheet, they paid for a trip, they swiped in the dining hall. Is 2,052, which is almost a third of Yale students, undergrads. These are all undergrad numbers. The grads numbers we haven't kind of crunched as much. So all the numbers are undergrad.
Hello.
We do a lot with grad students also, and I can say a little bit more about that.
Hi, this is Melinda from Slifka Center.
Yes.
Are you able to hear
Melinda,
now
can
or
you
not?
mute?
No, I can see it, everything,
There's
but I,
some crosstalk. Oh, that's better. Okay, wait, let's just go back one. That first slide. I just wanted to share one of the interesting things we just parsed out is, so if you were to break the ways or reasons people come into 2 different categories. One is weekday meals, Tuesday lunch, bagel brunch on Saturday, Thursday dinner, right? Those are kind of, it's great that people are here, that they're in a Jewish space. There's also not a ton of Jewish content to those. I mean, unless you really believe that Locks is a lot of Jewish content. So it turns out and bagel brunch is huge. You know, it can be 3, 4 on a really big week, 500 students lined literally around the block, which is pretty great. You know, I was buying salmon at the local State Street and Humphrey place, and the son of the who was working there is just finished his first year, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my roommate's Jewish. He's Asian himself and not Jewish, and I come with him to Slifka for the food. It's really good." Right, so he is in that, this young man, Alex, I was talking with, is in the weekday meals only category. So he came, which is about 480 students. But the more remarkable thing is the much bigger blue Pac-Man size, right, of 72 and a half, 1,400 students. 1,400, actually it's 1,480, I think. 1,480 students came to Slifka for a Jewishly substantive event. Shabbat dinner, Rosh Hashanah dinner, Yom Kippur services, intro to Judaism, you know, a service learning trip, travel to Israel, 1,485 students this year. And to put that in perspective, our estimates of the number of Jewish students are in the ballpark of 750, give or take 50. So that means that, you know, about 50, some very large percentage of the Jewish students are doing Jewishly substantive things at Slifka, and also a lot of non-Jewish students are, which is a fascinating thing. And if you ever hear President Salovey talk about this place, he kind of constantly comes back to the importance of that. I think he gets it very deeply. So that's pretty great. You know, one of the jokes he says, you know, the way you can tell if a kosher restaurant is any good is whether people who don't keep kosher eat there. And I feel like there's something similar with Slifka. To the extent that that's a good metric for kosher restaurants, this is saying something good about what we're doing here. So I'll just say a little bit more about this, because literally today we just got to dig down deeper in these numbers. So you click one slide through. So when you break this down by class year, these numbers are super tiny, which I apologize for. But the up in the top right, the 414 in blue, that's the class of 2023. 347 is the class of 2024. And then the much larger gray and yellow slices, 631 from the class of 2025 and 637, which is the biggest number of all, from the class of 2026. And so just what I want you to see is this is going in the right direction, right? That the sophomores and juniors actually had, well, actually you'll see in a second for the freshmen, the first years as we call them now, it was 41% of first years came to Slifka. And if you could click through the next slide, this just illustrates one thing in the background. These blue bars, the bigger blue bars, are the size of the Yale classes, right? There was that big drop for the class of 2024 because people postponed for the pandemic, and then a big bump in for the class of 2025, whereas 2023 and 2026 are at historical levels. And that red line, you're seeing the trend line across, is the percentage of students in each class who came to Slifka during this past year. So you can see the juniors and seniors, it was hovering just over 25%, increasing to about kind of 35% or so for sophomores, and there you can see it clocking in over 40% for the first years. So we're hoping that this is a cohort effect, right? Which means that the first years, as they progress through the next 4 years, will continue to be here a lot and will only build on this. And there are reasons to think that that's plausible. For example, the first years are the ones who, the only Slifka they know is the renovated post-pandemic one. Whereas for the juniors and sophomores, they've never been in this building. You know, I have people in this office, they say, oh, you have a nice office. And it's hard for me to remember they've been here 2 years and they've never been here because we weren't in the building because of the pandemic. And so what we're hoping is that, you know, it could also be the case, right, that people tend to fall away as they're seniors. And so that's something we're hoping won't be happening over the next 4 years. But I just wanted to give you this quantitatively as an overview of this is the major place on campus. One of the interesting questions I have is, you know, what are the other places that have the 40% of the first years went to this year? It's not many, right, in terms of scale of operation. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now we're done with the quantitative stuff. Let's look at some pictures. Okay, matzah pizza baking, right? This is good stuff. So what you see is a group of students. This is that Sunday of Passover. And one of the things you can't see looking at this picture, but I can see, I mean, you can see if you know these people, is you have like an extreme diversity of students here. Like those kind of young men who are smiling, spent 2 years at Yeshivat Har Etzion, an elite modern Orthodox university. Ruthie Weinbaum, who's wearing the Beth shirt, is from Northampton, Massachusetts, a conservative family. Eliza, who's in the foreground, is on the women's crew team and led the Reform community for a while. And they're all there together, right? You can't see those differences really in the picture, which is the whole story. If you click through to the next one, I've got, I think, 2 more of these. This is Israel Independence Day, Yom Ha'atzmaut party. The plan had been for that to be outside, but the weather was terrible, although not apocalyptic like it is today. And I hope you just see this is great. There were no protests. People had a lot of good, clean fun. There was a camera booth and a lot of other stuff happening. It was really, really lovely. And let's go to the next one. Challah for Hunger Bake. This is Zevi. I know we've got Yonina on this call. If you can't read those shirts that say "Not Your Boobies Bakery," which was special swag that Zevi created. And this is some of the biggest events here. You know, 30, 40 people will come to Bake Challah. It's very therapeutic. You can see like good bonds. And I will share something that's actually nice to me as one of these young men. I actually don't even know his name, right? I really want to meet this guy, right? That I'm here a lot, but I'm not here a lot also, and other people are doing stuff. And that's just part of the magic of it. And I think do we have one more picture, or is that it? Oh, and we have 2 more, I guess. So this is cool. This is the Senior Mellon Forum. So for those of you, I guess, may have graduated Yale before, this Mellon Forums are opportunities for seniors to share their research with the residential college. And we're like, we want to do this too. And so what you have is, that's Mayan up there, although that is not her research. That's Rachel Welch's research. Rachel's going to do a mud fud, and Isabel Kirsch is up there also. And there were, I think, about 10 seniors and 30 people there to support them this year. And it's just a great opportunity for people to be their whole selves here, including their super nerdy selves, which we love. And then there's one more slide here, which is, this is total bedlam. You can't see the screen, which is probably for the better. This is the senior roasting and toasting, where the balance over the years has shifted more towards the roasting. But very high production values. Like one group of juniors who was roasting a senior interviewed his high school girlfriend to get some dirt. So it was really well done. This is kind of a culmination. What you see here is I think there are about 60 people there. Is the relationships are very, very deep. People know each other. They love each other. They've been through a lot together, especially the group that lived through the pandemic and the renovation. And these are like real relationships. And I hope that these pictures have done some of what the numbers can't do in describing what you're doing. There's one thing I think that actually kind of isn't captured by anything that I want to say, which is, so if we can turn off the screen share for a sec, because I think that's the end of this phase. I do just want to say that we have a real emphasis on students creating this community. They are not its consumers, or not only its consumers, but they're primarily its producers also. And that's really, you can't kind of get that in a picture, but you can get it by the amount of time our staff spend working with students to help make their dreams realities and help them dream bigger. which I can share more about. So I've said a bunch of things. First, I want to Ori, is there anything critical you feel like I left out?
I would just add one other thing, which is that you've heard about big numbers like 400 or 500 students for bagel brunch. You've seen some smaller numbers in the pictures. Shabbat dinners, which are the really cornerstone event of the year, were averaged over 200 students per week, which is much higher than it was even pre-pandemic. So it's the numbers we've been seeing are across the board.
Great. I'm happy to take some questions in the chat if people want to add anything that seemed unclear or I omitted. I can also just talk a little bit more, but I'd love for you to give me some direction.
So as people, I'll give people a few seconds to put some questions in. But if you don't have questions now, that's totally fine. We can move into the other section and then do a fuller Q&A at the end. So we'll give it another couple of seconds to see if any questions pop up. And there is one.
Only came one time. Yes. So that is, we have those numbers, Bob. So Bob asked has a great question. Can you exclude people only came one time or only came 2 times? We can, and that would be interesting to do. The numbers would go down somewhat, but not that much below that 1,400 number. The fun thing no one asked is, well, how many times did the person who came the most come? There's a first year who we have just recorded appearances, 438. But I think we weren't even tracking Morning Minion, which he came to almost every day. So you toss in another 100 plus there. We're talking 600, right? So that's also, there's very rich data there. I do just want to say one word about what's the best way for a first year student to begin to get involved? So the first thing is to just show up, right? And there's like a lot of different ways. There's Shabbat dinner. We always do a carnival on, what was formerly Columbus Day, now Indigenous Peoples Day. We're actually working with an alum who's an alder now to get a permit to block off Wall Street this year and go big, not go home. So there's so many different opportunities. We table as first years are moving in. There are special first year ambassadors. So I think it depends a lot on what someone's looking for, right? But the main thing is just show up and get to know people and to find your people. Fane, I'm happy to speak more offline there. I do want to say a word about mental health because it's so important. My wife is a therapist and actually works at Yale Mental Health here. And something we take seriously, and I want to say 2 things about it. The first is my sense is that the most important thing we do, although I don't have really solid data for this, is kind of an upstream effect on mental health. What I mean by that is the studies of the London cholera outbreak, where it's rather than treating each case, they went to the well where the cholera was breeding and shut that down, and then downstream people stopped getting cholera. In that, I mean that a lot of people are lonely and students are lonely, and students often feel that the only thing that matters about them is their brilliance and being smarter than everyone they've ever met. And it turns out the Yale kind of crushes, right? That's that you're not going to be smarter than everyone you've ever met here, even if you were for the first 18 years of your life. And so a lot of what we are here is a place where students aren't lonely, where people notice if they aren't showing up or if they're showing up and don't seem well. And people like them and love them for being them, not because they're excellent or not because they're the best. And I think that matters a lot. And I believe that matters a lot. And I would love to be able to quantify that. The second thing is our staff speak a lot with students on a kind of spectrum of mental health things. We're not trained therapists. We do not play the role of therapists in students' lives. We also, I think, have good boundaries, but I'll give you 2 examples. One is I met with a student earlier this week who he's just finished his 2nd year, and he'd had a really just rocky time in a relationship. It was his first, he said, the first time I've ever had a best friend and the first time I've ever had a romantic partner. And he also decided to end it by the end of the year and was just trying to figure out kind of what did I experience? What did I learn? How is, Am I going to find someone? I'm going to find love again. All those kinds of things, and just work through them was really moving. And there are also harder cases, like over the Passover. There was a student who was registered for the Seders with the Orthodox couple, and she didn't come. And she then had her phone turned off. And so actually they consulted with a Chabad, member of the Chabad community who also knew her and said she didn't seem well, and contacted her dean, and actually ended up like helping her enter inpatient psychiatric treatment. And so that's the sense of, right, when people are here and are kind of known and recognized, we're also in a much better position, not to provide their mental health care, but to help them get mental health care. And so I could share a lot more stories like that, but I did just want to frame that this is a part of our work and a framework for it, and I think something we contribute to, and also something we work in partnership with a lot of other people and organizations on.
Great, Jason. Thank you so much for that. Let's move on to the next part of our agenda here, which has to do with successes and challenges in Jewish belonging. So I want to start with some successes, because on previous calls and various conversations we've talked about some of these, and there's some good progress to share. So the first piece is that starting this year, Yale Security is providing day-to-day security services at Slifka, which took a long time to arrange, and I'm really, really grateful for. We can all sleep at night, which we should not have been before, but we can now because Yale Security is in place. And it's also important to acknowledge President Salovey, who was able to get a commitment for Yale to cover the costs of that for 3 years on a trial basis. So this past year was the first year, so we have 2 more years on that arrangement. And so far things are really good. So we should feel good about that. The Campus Climate Initiative is a program of Hillel International designed to train university administrators and Hillel professionals, but mostly Yale administrators, about anti-Semitism. What do Jews look like? What is Judaism about? What are all these connections to Israel? How do we navigate the difficult integrations between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism or criticism of Israel? And I'm really grateful and proud to say that there are 7 administrators from Yale who are participating with me in a 15-month training course on this. And we just had a meeting of our group today, really productive, thinking long-term, trying to figure out how to make use of the data that we're in the process of collecting, and how to make sure that paying attention to anti-Semitism is something that happens at Yale for a long time, and outlasts any of us, or issues of turnover or anything like that. This is something that Yale needs to be paying attention to. So the Campus Climate Initiative and the commitment that Yale has made is really important. As many of you know, the kosher dining financial situation has been an enormous problem for Slifka. The way things have worked up until now is that the amount that Slifka is reimbursed on the Yale meal plan, which is wonderful that we can accept it, only covers about 35% of the cost of the meal, which leaves Slifka subsidizing Yale to somewhere to the tune of about $500,000 a year, and that's been the case for more than a decade, maybe even more, maybe substantially more than that. This summer or this spring, there's been substantial progress in trying to rectify that situation, and the partnership is moving ahead. So I don't have anything to report at this moment, but it's promising. I just found out today that anti-Semitism training is going to be part of the first-year orientation for undergraduate and graduate students this fall. So that's a big deal. The first time anything like this has ever happened. So that's a success. And also, the interim university chaplain is going to be a Jewish woman, which is doubly wonderful. But as Meital Saltiel, the incoming university chaplain, told us today, It's the first time there will ever be a mezuzah on the doorposts of the chaplain's house at Yale, and that is really significant in a lot of ways, and should speak loudly to Yale's interest in supporting the Jewish community. So these are some successes, and there's a lot to be pleased about, and a lot of promise and a lot of progress. It doesn't mean that we're anywhere near done, and so there have been some serious challenges to Jewish belonging this year. That many of you may have read about or heard about. I'm not going to go into all of the details about all of them, but I'll just to frame it. Starting in November or so, there started to be some op-eds in the Yale Daily News written by students promoting boycott, divestment, sanction activity at Yale. There were some students who wrote back pushing back against that. Against BDS, and that conversation sort of continued student to student. In the spring, a group called Yale's for Palestine, which had formed in the aftermath of the fighting in Israel and Gaza in May of 21, started preparing and putting forward a boycott, divestment, sanction style resolution. And their plan was to get a lot of signatures from different groups at the university, mostly student groups, but perhaps others, and then submit that to the Yale College Council for consideration and passage. And the resolution would have called upon Yale to cancel a contract that this group found to be objectionable. In fact, it's very interesting that the Yale's for Palestine group actually reached out to me and asked if Slifka would co-sponsor the resolution, which of course we did not. But it did set up a rather interesting conversation to understand, where they're coming from, and to give me the opportunity really to share where the Jewish community or Jewish community views and how this comes across as deeply anti-Semitic to many people, not all Jews, but many. Fast forward to where we are now, to keep the story reasonably short. The resolution has not yet been submitted to the Yale College Council, so that's one win. A second win is that in the recent Yale College Council elections, there are 4 times as many Jewish senators as there were before, which changes the dynamics, in the Yale College Council, if and when that does come forward. So that's another win. The leadership of the Yale College Council that was recently elected, is not going to be promoting this. They're not going to quash it either, but they're not going to be big promoters of it on their own. And that is an eventuality that could have happened with a different outcome of the election. So there are a lot of different pieces. We do anticipate that this story is not over, and there will be more to it in the fall. And our job, Slifka's job, is to make sure that the interests of the Jewish community are taken seriously, and the sense of Jewish belonging is kept strong within the university context. So that's the first piece. The second one, which is the one that probably got the most press coverage, was this speaker, Huria Boutelja, I think is her name, a French speaker who came, who was invited by a member of the Yale faculty to come and speak on Passover, on the evening of the first day of Passover, which, since Passover is one of the most observed Jewish holidays, that was a particularly interesting time. It disenfranchised perhaps the largest number of Jewish students who might have wanted to have their voices heard as possible. And this speaker, was promoting anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, and other objectionable, bias-ridden content. And so that was an issue that came up. We spent a lot of time beforehand, during, and after, in partnership with the administration, trying to figure out what the right way forward is. How can we support students? How can we support the university in taking whatever actions it was considering taking, it was able to take around these issues? And most importantly, besides helping students to prepare protests and things to hand out if they wanted, We are even now in conversations both with those departments that invited that speaker and also the faculty and the administration as a whole, thinking about how can we make these situations better in the future? How can we reach out to those how can faculty reach out to communities that are going to be impacted by speakers they want to bring? How can we create an environment where the interests and needs of various parts of the community can all be lifted up without attacking each other, which is something that the whole world is struggling with at this point in time, and we've taken a very, very strong role in this alongside our partners at Yale in the aftermath of this situation. The Yale Law School situation is interesting. They've run an Israel trip over the last number of years, every year, and last year, a year ago, they ran a trip, but the leadership of that trip was bullied and doxxed and really harassed by people who are hold anti-Israel views for being involved, and it certainly crossed the line. Well, we certainly thought, and the student thought, it crossed the line of free speech and into really unacceptable places. And so this year the law school still, there still was an Israel trip to that was held for law school students, but there was no leadership. There were no students who were willing to step up to organize such a trip at the risk of the harassment that they knew that the former leader took. And so if the environment at any place at Yale is having the effect of dampening and suppressing student initiative, student leadership, student voices, then the university has a problem, and that is the case at Yale Law School. And so we were involved in every stage of both supporting the student who was in that situation and also in conversations with partners at the university to try to address this issue. You may have heard that there were anti-Semitic flyers distributed in Hampton and East Rock this spring. They featured an SOM student who had apparently, we talked to him, he had no connections to anti-Semitism. There was somebody, whoever put those flyers out, made some big jumps in logic or tried to make use of, I don't know exactly what the thought process there, but it was certainly based in hate and took it out on the Jewish community. And then the last part, which is not anti-Semitism in its own right, but it was impacted by it. As I'm sure many of you know, there have been lots and lots of well-attended and coordinated protests in Israel against the judicial reforms that the government is considering there, with groups joining it from all over the world. And we have Israelis who are studying at Yale who wanted to participate in those protests, which we certainly supported. Their right to protest that as well as the supporters of the judicial reform, any students who wanted to support it. And it was the unfortunate part of the connection back to anti-Semitism is that the situation in the world, and also at Yale at the time that this was coming up, was such that both I and our partners at Yale, when this came up, were concerned about the ways in which the campus environment would perceive Israelis protesting. Most of the campus, like most of the world, does not follow what's happening in the Israeli government and would have no context for why there are Jewish people hanging out there with Israeli flags chanting. And so we had some really serious conversations with those students, letting them, trying to get them to understand, which they did with not too much difficulty, understand the environment in which their protests were being considered and how and what the impacts might be for the greater Jewish community. And so just the fact that we have to have this conversation, that we're thinking about what the impacts are, what the limitations we might think about for public displays of Jewish identity and Jewish pride, says something really troubling about the environment that we're in. Now, I still say that Yale is is better off than a number of different places. We've by and large not had really acute, we've had no physical attacks on Jews. We've not in a while, in a few years, but nothing with this particular rise. So we've been fortunate in that way, but there's also a lot more work to do. So I don't expect you to read this whole list here, but the reason to have it here, and some of these things that we've done, I talked about, and others that I skipped over because we'd be here all night. We have made really intentional decisions about when we've gotten up and raised the anti-Semitism flag. There were people, in any of these instances that I outlined, who said to us, why aren't you yelling? Why aren't you gathering the alumni? Why aren't you rallying the troops? And the answer is because we are in a partnership with the university where they're listening and they're paying attention. They're not necessarily doing everything that we would want them to do, and they've got to make their own calculations. But if we were in a case where we couldn't get where the bear was asleep, and we couldn't get the bear's attention, and we had to poke and poke and poke, that would be one thing, and we'd be rallying the troops and getting people's attention. But in fact, that's not the case. Our partners are paying attention, and so in those moments, we focused on our partnership with Yale to try to get the best outcomes for Jewish students and the Jewish community at Yale in those moments. That was our decision, and I think those have been the right decisions at every step. But it doesn't mean that we weren't busy. we were very, very involved and continue to be very involved in an active and proactive way. If we don't tell people what we're doing, we have every right to expect that people would think we're not doing anything. So I wanted everybody to know about all of the things that we've been doing, and the hundreds and hundreds of staff hours that I have spent, and Jason has spent, and other members of our staff have spent supporting students, working with them, strategizing with partners at the university, and really trying to figure out what is best for the Jews in this case, to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make Yale a good place to be Jewish. So this is one example of a great partnership, the Belonging at Yale initiative, which was launched a couple of years ago through the Secretary's office, which is really, the umbrella program for diversity, equity, and inclusion across the university. And as soon as we saw this, we got right into this notion of Jewish belonging, because if everyone's supposed to belong, then Jews are supposed to belong too. And so that's been Slifka's main focus, and the fact that Bagel Brunch has been promoted as a signature Belonging at Yale initiative is an example of the ways in which we are partnering with Yale in lots of ways. So I'll stop the presentation here. Jason, is there anything that I missed?
I just want to say Ori's really hard at this, and it's not easy. And that, as there's no experience I've had in my work life here or elsewhere where what happens under the hood or behind the curtain is more different than what you read in the headlines. And so, for when I see Pilar smiling, what we're talking about. Pilar knows it better than any of us do, I think. And so we could kind of share more of some of these stories, but the image that I use the most, as I do with many things, is the son of an economist, is in game theory, the critical distinction is a one-off game versus a multi-round game, right? If you're just going to meet someone once and negotiate, and then you part yourself ways never to see them again, you play the game one way. And when you're going to be there day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, you play the game differently, because the relationship matters. And this is a multi-round game. We are, one of the ways, I'll just share, I guess, one more framework. And again, like Ori has done so much work on this, is it's hard for those of us who are Jewish, and especially those of us who work in the Jewish community, to understand how little most people know about Jews and Judaism. And it's a lot of work. Yale has something like 15,000 staff. And turnover, right? Even if you educated all 15,000 of them over the course of 5 years, you wouldn't be done, because in 5 years, there'd be a lot of new staff. And so thinking about, well, what does it look like to build real relationships where people know and trust us, people learn about Judaism, it's not the fast path, and it's the high road, but it's not just the high road, right? It's also, I think, the most effective one. And so that's work that we've kind of has become more and more important in what we do. And also, I just want to point out, is large. We have a big staff, but compared to Yale, it's very small. And so we've been thinking a lot about how to expand and scale this work. And I just want to say one more thing, that there have been moments. I'll just share one story in this vein. The most meaningful thing, which does happen a lot, and again, Pilar does a lot of it, is when there's outreach from Yale. One example is last year in the fall, I got an email from the dean at the Divinity School, who's responsible for the daily worship in Marquand Chapel, which is run by a different student every day. And this dean reached out to me because the student had selected a scriptural reading from the New Testament because it contained an interesting metaphor the student wanted to teach on. And the dean reached out to me because she said, this passage, unbeknownst to the student actually, had been the linchpin of a certain tradition of Christian anti-Semitism. And she felt like, well, I can't tell the student they can't pick this passage, but she had prepared an introduction to say before the services started, saying people need to know about this history and how we disavow it and how we worked against it. And she was sending me her draft as a Word document of the introduction to see if it said the things that I thought needed to be said. And I was like, wow, I would have never known this was happening at the Divinity School. I didn't know anything about the reception history of this passage in Mark or something. And I was like, this is amazing. This is everything you guys are doing. And we corresponded a lot over the years. So I just wanted to share with you that those are the kinds of stories that happen here. And I could obviously share a lot more of them. And those are the stories, as Ori always puts it well, that don't make it into the headlines, but are probably the most interesting and best ones. Okay, now we have a bunch of questions. Let's take them.
So with regard to special programs for new faculty, this is an area certainly of partnership with the university. One of the things that I've learned in the time that I've gotten to spend with my university colleagues is that the job of the folks who work at the university is so huge. Because we have all these concerns, and we're just one community, and there are all these other communities to be paying attention to also. And so anything that we do regarding anti-Semitism has to fit into the broader picture and lives of the other folks in the university. And so one of the things that we've talked about, and I mentioned this group of 7 Yale administrators. They are all in different departments and different areas and have influence in different areas. And so questions of how do we impact faculty? How do we impact staff? How do we impact different kinds of staff have come up in these discussions. There aren't easy answers to any of them, but these are discussions that we are having. And obviously, we need to work with the folks at Yale who can best fit this in. The other thing which point that we've come across a number of times is that anything one learns about anti-Semitism, one can very easily cross-apply to other communities, other vulnerable communities. And so unfortunately, the Jewish community has thousands and thousands of years of experience dealing with and studying anti-Semitism, and that's really bad. On the other hand, it means we have a lot to offer. And so, our part of the hope is that what we are bringing in training and in influence and in policy and new things slowly but surely are going to make Yale better for the Jews and also for everyone else in a sustainable and long-lasting way. But it has to be in a way that fits in with the way Yale does things, to be understood, and so that we don't create backlash. Because the more we expect and require special treatment, the harder it gets, as we all know. So. All right. Do we require students to contribute? So the answer is mostly no. We see our role, the students are the main beneficiaries of our work. So there's no such thing as membership. I know there was at one point, but there isn't any longer any sense of membership. And so students don't pay. They pay for meals via the meal plan. But we do our best to have the lowest barriers possible to student participation, which is one of the reasons why the numbers are as extraordinary as the ones that Jason shared earlier. Okay, so residential college first-year counselors, yeah. So one of the things that we've done, the main answer to that about training is the same answer as to the question that was asked earlier about staff. But there is something that we've been doing over the last few years, and this is mostly Jason's initiative, in reaching out proactively at the beginning of the year to all of the heads of college, all of the academic deans in the colleges, the deans of the various graduate schools, and a whole long list of folks at Yale. Reaching out, introducing ourselves, letting them know who we are, letting them know what the resources available to Jewish students are, whether it's for high holidays or for Passover or for Shabbat or whatever it is, so that there will be as few people in those positions of influence who don't know what the resources are or where to turn to support Jewish life at Yale. So that's something we've taken really seriously.
There's a question from my father. Hi, Dad. Yes, we do work with the Secure Communities Network and consult with them, and they've done trainings for our staff, actually, which we opened up to the broader community, and it was fascinating. The pastor of the Black Church at Yale came to the last one. I want to just table your question. Compared to when we started here, Ori and I started in 2018, is the community better, worse for Jewish students? I hope it's better. I think it's better. I do want to say, I'll just share two stories, which are among my favorite stories. One is a student reported overhearing her roommate say, "I wish I had a cult like Slifka to be part of." And the other, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking down College Street to pick up my bike from getting repaired, and I hear behind me Slifka. It's like that thing when your name is, you perk up. And this was a group of students, it was Bulldog Days, and they were talking about what's happening. One student was like, "Oh, there's bagel brunch at 10:30 tomorrow night at Slifka," which we put on for the prospective students. Someone was like, "Oh, really? That's great." And someone else was like, there's like this group of friends, and I slowed down a little bit so I can listen. They're like, "But wait, why are you going to Slifka? It's like, you're not even Jewish." And she was like, "Oh, well, first let me tell you, there's the community there, people are just so fun." She's like, "Also there's fruit punch, that's really hard to get in the dining halls, and 3 or 4 other things." And someone was like, "So you're an honorary Jew?" And she was like, "Yeah, and you should all come with me to Slifka." And someone else was like, "I consider myself recruited." And she's like, "Well, now you've got my pitch, everyone's getting it." And I was like, this is the most amazing thing that's happening. And the reason I want to share that, and there's one other story that I share a lot because I think it's important, is Marcy Shore, who's a senior professor. She's a rock star. She teaches the European intellectual history since Nietzsche class, which at Yale's a big class. And she would say in her lecture on Thursday, she said, a class on Heidegger, right, and his relationship with the Nazis. Actually, he was a Nazi. The relationship of his Nazism to his thought. She said, "If you want to talk about these things at greater length, I'll be having Shabbat dinner at Slifka tomorrow night to her 300 students." That makes a big difference in what it means to be Jewish on campus. And I want to again thank President Salovey here, because in response to some of the things that he has, I think, rightly seen as attacks on kind of the ability to be Jewish in the public sphere, he has started, not all the time, but often, explicitly incorporating Hebrew texts from the Jewish tradition, texts from his ancestors who are rabbinic scholars, into his speeches to really perform being loud and proud as a Jew. And I think those kinds of things matter a lot. So to the extent you're hearing other things, I want and need to hear those things, but my sense is that it's a great time to I'll just share one other thing. If you click on the forward, basically any day, you'll see these, I think correctly alarmed stories about the cratering number of people going to rabbinical schools and Jewish professional training more broadly, which is true. And in a 3-week period in March, 4 sophomores came up to me and told me they are thinking about rabbinical or cantorial school very seriously. So if these trend lines keep up, 75% of the rabbis and cantors in America will be Yale alumni, which wouldn't be a terrible thing. But I just want to say that I think those indicate that there's something thrilling about being Jewish here. And I hope we've conveyed some of that. And you should come and see it and feel it for yourself, because that's the best way to get a sense of it.
I completely agree. I just want to add one other piece, which is, Slifka itself has gotten stronger and stronger and stronger over the time that we've been on campus. The pandemic and construction obviously were a big challenge, but there was but we came out of it really, really strong. I just can't believe the ways in which the community snapped back this year, and students came back and really embraced the building and embraced everything that we had to offer. And so from that standpoint, Yale is a better place to be Jewish than it was when we started. The world is crazier by a lot than it was when we started. And so if we just look at the world, then it's a worse place to be Jewish everywhere. And it's also a worse place to be a marginalized, vulnerable person anywhere. So that's worse. So the question is, and at Yale, again, we've had some issues. There's a lot of work to do, and we've not been one of those one of the worst places. The worst things have not happened at Yale, and the bad things have been, I think, fairly contained. So how you balance that out, is how you want to think about that is really up to you. But I think Jewish students at Yale have about as much support from Slifka as they could possibly have, and we've got the relationships to help to make that better and better and better. All right, are there any last questions? The clock just ticked to 9 o'clock Eastern, so we'll take one more. Jewish belonging and anti-Semitism. Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay, so this is a great question from Doug about contradictory views within the Jewish community about anti-Semitism. That's a terrific question. So, we have a diverse community, a diverse Jewish community at Yale, with a lot of disagreement on a lot of things, including Israel. Lots of things. There are members of the Jewish community who would support the boycott, divestment, sanction resolution that I mentioned earlier. So there's really significant disagreement, and that's productive because it's reflective of the world. It's reflective of the nature of the Jewish community more broadly, and it's conversation that's actually happening, which is more than we can say for most places in the world. So there's a lot of productive disagreement. I think even with our I think we have a really important job, which is to teach about anti-Semitism. Most students, particularly those, center left and left, really don't have a clear, they don't have a lot of experience with anti-Semitism. They don't see it in places where other people see it. They probably, because America is still a great place to be Jewish, haven't experienced it personally, and are guided by senses of justice, which is so critical. And so, Slifka is successfully, to this point, a place where those conversations can happen and those tensions can exist. We need to teach about anti-Semitism because it's a real thing. We're not going to teach people where to see it and tell them what to think and what to do and all of that. And for the most part, you know, in a lot of ways, anti-Semitism can be cut and dried, but sometimes it isn't. And so we have an obligation to teach Jews and non-Jews about anti-Semitism so that people can be aware and can make their own decisions and can be involved in conversations where they understand where the other is coming from. You know, and if we've got one part of the community that's saying this is anti-Semitism and another part of the community that's saying it isn't anti-Semitism, that's a good conversation to have. And I will also, and I'll close by saying that especially over these last 6 months, you know, as the BDS piece has come up and these other situations have come up, the conversation within the Jewish community has been quite respectful. People have raised their views. They've come to me and come to Jason and said, we disagree with this, we disagree with that, we think that, the other thing. And yet our community as a whole is whole and strong and committed to working together. And that's something that I'm extremely proud of. So it's 9:04. So I think we'll call it a wrap here. I really want to thank everyone for being on this call. Just one final reminder: our fiscal year ends on June 30th, and so if you haven't already made a gift to Slifka this year, you still have a great opportunity. You know, we are a partner with Yale, but we get no direct funding from Yale. You know, everything we do is because of partnerships with alumni and parents and community members and folks who care that Yale should be a great place to be Jewish. And Slifka really has emerged over the last year, especially as the central address for advocating for that and making that happen. So if you care about those things, you should care about Slifka, and please think of us both in terms of contributions between now and June 30th. And if you're thinking about your estate plan, include us in your estate plan too. This is a long-term effort, and we're happy to help in any way that we can. So thank you all so much for being here, and look forward to connecting with everyone in the fall. Have a great summer.